for investors, it's one of the biggest feedback we get from retail investors is sometimes we hear that it's very difficult, that it may be that investors want to invest in copper or gold or uranium, but the average investor is not a geologist or a mining engineer. So it's very difficult for them to pick individual companies. So you see the popularity of ETFs, which have a basket of companies in them. And so ETF investing has become very popular. You have a basket of mines in that portfolio. Uranium royalty investing is a similar approach where we have the 30, 40-year veterans, the geologists, the mining engineers that go out and do the due diligence. And if we're comfortable with that mine's prospects and potential going forward, we'll enter into that relationship on behalf of our investors and give our shareholders that exposure to that mine's development.
Welcome to this edition of Retire Well, Retire Happy with your host, Annie Nelson. An Australian look at reinventing yourself for retirement and getting yourself retirement ready. It's always fascinating getting to know what people are getting up to in retirement, how they are supplementing their incomes, pensions, where they have chosen to live, how they are filling their time, what charities they are supporting, and what adventures they are having. And we'll also talk to experts in their fields, including investing, health, estate planning, financial advisors, and seniors healthcare.
Hi, welcome back to the Retire Well, Retire Happy show with your host, Annie Nelson. And today we have a special guest. His name is Scott Melby. Scott is a 36-year veteran of the nuclear energy industry, having held leadership positions in major uranium mining companies as well as industry-wide organizations. He serves as Executive Vice President of Uranium Energy Corp., a U.S. uranium mining exploration company, and Chief Executive Officer of Uranium Royalty Corp., the first and only pure-play uranium royalty and streaming company in the uranium industry. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be on with your viewers and listeners today. It's a real pleasure.
It's different talking to someone that's involved in the mining and resource industries. So you've got an extensive range of experience. So what's led you down this path to where you are now?
Well, it's interesting. I've been engaged in the nuclear energy industry and uranium mining for close to 37 years now. And it's really interesting to see how the industry has changed in terms of public acceptance, both politically, with environmentalists, with investment community. Down in Australia, you have such a rich mining history down there, and you understand resource industries as well as anyone. Where you haven't moved into in terms of carbon-free energy is nuclear power. And I know there's quite a debate going on with small modular reactors and things that could help you meet your carbon emissions reduction goals going forward. But we're really beginning to see the narrative change around nuclear power. As I said, with politicians, I mean, we've had the green energy movement really being led out of Europe. Certainly Australia has embraced it for some time, but now in the Biden administration in the United States, we're seeing these policies being adopted in the U.S., and not without a great deal of disruption because it has an enormous impact on the coal industries, oil and gas. But the uranium industry with nuclear power are one of the industries that's really being looked on favorably. The ability for nuclear power plants to run 24/7 and provide carbon-free energy actually provides an excellent complement and a backup to renewable wind and solar, which are fine other than the fact that they run at best 25 to 30% of the time. So as a society, if we're going to grow with our energy demands, with computerization of everything, electric vehicles, not only are we going to have to figure out how to get more energy going forward, we're going to have to adopt cleaner energy technology. So that's why our industry is really being looked on in a favorable light these days.
I know in Australia, the minority of people that think that wind and solar are a good thing, they switched off the coal-fired power station in Adelaide a few years ago, and not long after they did it, there was a major storm came through the area and it plunged the city into darkness for several days because the solar power and the wind generation just didn't add up. Didn't stack up.
Yeah, it's having been down in Adelaide and had the pleasure of speaking at a conference down there a couple of years ago. I did a lot of research into what Victoria and South Australia have been experiencing, and these are two states that have really embraced renewable energies. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not anti-wind or solar. It's just that we have to recognize what their capabilities are, what their strengths are, and what their weaknesses are. And I think in South Australia's case, there's too much reliance on intermittent wind and solar. And so you need to figure out what's the backup. And I know the very famous transaction between Elon Musk and the state where he supplied the battery backup power to the wind farms. That does provide value to the grid in South Australia, but it equates to minutes of backup power when the wind stops blowing and the backup power supplies have to kick in, which in South Australia's case are either diesel oil or gas-fired generation. So the backup is not the batteries, the backup are fossil fuels. Now, I'm okay with that in terms of a balanced energy policy, but I don't think that was the objective going in. So I think it really is legitimate to look at nuclear power, both the existing fleets that in the United States, we get 20% of our electricity from nuclear, but it's 55% of our carbon-free power. So if we moved away from nuclear power in the United States, there would be no way that we could meet really aggressive decarbonization of the energy sector. And it's why we're now seeing in this country both Democrats and Republicans both viewing nuclear as part of the solution going forward. And I have to tell you, you probably follow our politics down there. Democrats and Republicans agree on very few things these days, but it's nice that nuclear power is one of the things that they do see eye to eye on.
Mm. So you'll come here to talk about the company that you represent. You've expanded, so you're not only doing mining, you're also doing your royalties. I know in Australia that's hard to get your head around because here the royalties belong to the Crown. But can you explain what happens?
So I'm involved as executive VP of a uranium mining company out of South Texas, and it's very straightforward. We use kind of an environmentally friendly and advanced mining technique called in situ recovery. It's something that's used in South Australia very successfully. But we've also launched another company called Uranium Royalty Corp, which is a way for investors to get a diversified exposure in the uranium and green nuclear energy story. And unlike investing in a uranium mining company where you're investing in that company's success or failure, we have a portfolio of 16 royalty interests around the world, and we're continuing to look to grow this portfolio with mines and developments in Australia, Africa, North America, Canada, and the United States to give that exposure. And you are right. In North America, you can have royalties or land mining rights owned by the Crown, which in the United States would be federal claim leases. But we also have a great deal of mining and resource activity on private lands, which would be ranchers and other big landowners. So when we mine on that land, we're paying that royalty owner, the landowner, an interest in every pound that's produced, either a financial interest of a royalty payment in the form of cash, or we also, as a royalty company, are interested in taking the physical commodity as payment as well. So not only is it a great way for investors to get exposure, we also can finance mine development and certainly are looking to be that source of finance that's separate from debt or equity, which would be the normal way someone would finance a new mine development. We can offer royalties where we give cash up front to develop a well field or a mine facilities in exchange for those future royalty rights on the mine. So it's quite popular in base and precious metals. Companies that are traded in North America like Franco-Nevada, Wheaton Precious Metals, Sandstorm Royal Gold have become a $50 billion industry in this regard. But it is something newer in Australia and something that isn't as developed as we see, say, in North America or elsewhere.
Yeah, there's still great resistance from the Green faction that on the use of uranium. It's a shame, but they seem to have a hold here.
Yeah, and it's part of our challenge is to really communicate the benefits of nuclear energy, and we are winning over environmental former opponents of nuclear energy and winning them over to be proponents of our technology because of the way it can be a complement to wind and solar. And certainly, I think they may fear fossil fuels more than nuclear, and we're certainly making advances with small modular reactors. I mean, nuclear energy is the safest form of energy, we know, and as clean as wind and solar. But it's really been our challenge to communicate that, and we are beginning to see broader acceptance. So we think we're environmentalists in the amount of energy that we can produce without air pollution or carbon emissions. So we got to keep winning over hearts and minds.
All right. So tell us about royalty investing.
Yeah, so with Uranium Royalty Corp, we will go out and either invest in existing royalties. Some examples of that are in Canada. We acquired royalties on the two largest, highest ore grade, richest uranium mines in the world at Cigar Lake and MacArthur River in northern Saskatchewan and western Canada. That's an example where we acquired those from an existing royalty owner and have that exposure on those mines. We will also, as I mentioned, we'll provide financing to new mine developers and certainly want to be present in every jurisdiction around the world, including Australia, where we would enter into a royalty relationship with the miner or developer as a way for them to advance their project. So for investors, it's one of the biggest feedback we get from retail investors is sometimes we hear that it's very difficult, that it may be that investors want to invest in copper or gold or uranium, but the average investor is not a geologist or a mining engineer. So it's very difficult for them to pick individual companies. So you see the popularity of ETFs, which have a basket of companies in them. And so ETF investing has become very popular. You have a basket of mines in that portfolio. Uranium royalty investing is a similar approach where we have the 30, 40-year veterans, the geologists, the mining engineers that go out and do the due diligence. And if we're comfortable with that mine's prospects and potential going forward, we'll enter into that relationship on behalf of our investors and give our shareholders that exposure to that mine's development. But again, it's diversified. We realize in our portfolio of 16 mines and developments, some are going to outperform and some are going to underperform. But if we've done our due diligence the way we are and should do, hopefully we have more winners than losers. And that's certainly been the model in base and precious metals with royalty companies.
Okay. So what exactly is uranium and what is it used for?
Yeah, so the main use for uranium is in electricity generation. So uranium ore is mined and ultimately is enriched and formed into pellets, which go into fuel rods, which form fuel assemblies. These fuel assemblies in a nuclear reactor are essentially heating elements that boil water to create steam to turn a turbine generator to produce electricity. So that is the main use of uranium. Of course, it's also a propulsion fuel for the U.S. Navy with aircraft carriers and submarines. Obviously, nuclear weapons is something society has been reducing the number of that, which has been a good thing over the course of my lifetime. And we've even seen dismantled nuclear weapons in Russia be blended down and be used as power plant fuel in the United States and elsewhere. So, today the use is electricity, naval propulsion, but we're also seeing nuclear power plants being used for hydrogen generation for trucks, buses, transportation needs. We're seeing desalination uses because the incredibly energy-intensive process of turning salt water into drinking water. Nuclear plants are being kind of eyed as an excellent source of energy. Bitcoin mining is one that two electric utility companies here in the United States, in Ohio and Pennsylvania, are siting either data centers or crypto mining facilities next to the nuclear power plant so they can take advantage of that green carbon-free label that goes with the electricity that comes from a nuclear power plant. So again, we're seeing a lot of innovative uses for nuclear power. And we're also seeing innovation in the plants themselves. The small modular reactors are not the 1,600 megawatt massive power plants. They can be 50, 100 megawatt plants that are built in a factory, shipped on site, and provide scalable power, which I think some of the discussion has begun in Australia, whether these should be a good complement to your various sources of energy that you enjoy in Australia. But I can tell you, we're seeing new plants being proposed and sited in the state of Wyoming, just north of where I'm located in Colorado. We're seeing Bill Gates, who has an advanced reactor company called TerraPower, selling a reactor to Warren Buffett, who owns the electric utility company in Wyoming. And they're placing this 300 megawatt or smaller advanced reactor on the site of a retiring coal-fired power plant. And this really addresses something that's very important here, because the socioeconomic disruption of coal being phased out has enormous impact on these coal regions in the United States. So if we can site, like Bill Gates is doing, these advanced nuclear plants in coal country, we can not only replace the jobs, but perhaps even upgrade the jobs in terms of both the construction and operation of those plants.
Right. So has the disposal of the waste product improved?
Yeah, it's funny. This issue, is always kind of pointed out, is this the Achilles heel of nuclear energy? And it's not really a technical or scientific challenge. We have two routes presently where we either go to a permanent geologic repository for the spent fuel, or we reprocess the spent fuel into new fuel, and we recycle like we recycle everything else. I think it surprises a lot of people that the volume of waste is quite manageable. We think of it as an overwhelming amount of waste, but we've kept every gram of waste that the nuclear energy industry has ever produced since the 1950s. We didn't pump it out of a smokestack. It didn't go out a pipeline into a lake or river. We've kept it on site. If you took the entire volume of all that spent fuel and waste since the 50s, it would fit on a typical size rugby or football field in terms of the volume in the United States. So we're not talking about a huge problem technically and scientifically. It's really politically, and the siting of that is where you usually face the challenges. But we're also seeing that there are communities willing to take those facilities that are, again, can be built safely and close that loop on nuclear energy on the back end.
Mm. Well, that's very reassuring to know. We hope more people can be converted.
Yes, absolutely.
So in summary, what would you like the listeners to know about this new way of investing in the Uranium Royalty Corporation?
Well, again, I think, as investors and those of us that are looking to build our net worth and your program as we move into retirement and be able to retire both happy and healthy, sometimes these disruptions that occur with this energy transition, which is, I think, of historic proportions, I think it's wise to kind of look at, okay, who are the winners and losers in this transition? And are there ways to invest in this green nuclear energy story? I mean, I think you can invest in wind and solar and these battery companies, but there's been so much capital thrown at those industries. And I think in terms of ESG investing, we're seeing a lot of this green energy investment coming into nuclear. And probably the best way to get the leverage to that story is in the uranium fuel cycle. So investing in uranium mining companies like Uranium Energy Corp is traded on the New York Stock Exchange as UEC, or Uranium Royalty Corp, which gives you that diversified exposure, is traded on the NASDAQ in the U.S. As UROY, UROY. But I would encourage your listeners and viewers to really look and see if uranium and green nuclear energy is a fit for their portfolios. I think we're really in the early stage. We've seen very significant capital appreciation of the uranium companies since the COVID low of March of last year, and certainly a lot of Australian companies doing very well. But we're also in a summer slow period in terms of the commodity, just the traditional seasonal commodity cycle for uranium. So we've seen some of these uranium stocks that have been up 400%, 500%, 600% since COVID have now fallen back 30 or 40%. So it is an excellent time to get a second kick at that cat, as you will, in terms of some of the better companies. But we're really only in the first or second inning to use the American baseball terminology of this uranium bull market. So encourage your viewers to take a look at uranium investing.
Uranium investing. And it's been great having you on the show. If anyone wanted to find out more about uranium royalty, where would they go?
Yeah, so uraniumroyalty.com is the website for URC, uraniumenergy.com for Uranium Energy Corp. If you want to learn more about nuclear energy on a global scale, I would encourage you to go to the World Nuclear Association out of London. They have a wonderful website with lots of resources to allow you to learn more about how nuclear energy fits in the mix going forward.
All right. Well, thanks very much for being on the Retire Well, Retire Happy show. This is your host, Andy Nelson, and we've been enjoying hearing from our special guest today, Scott Melby.
Thank you, Annie. It's been a pleasure.
You have been listening to the podcast show of Retire Well, Retire Happy with your host, Annie Nelson. For more information on the show's guests and being retirement ready, pop on over to my website, www.annelson.com.au, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next time, be happy, stay healthy, and help somebody.